Hey everybody, Matty Ice here, and in today's video I'm going to take you through a build that I've been playing around with here and testing out that actually was able to do over 3.5 million damage in a very short Grasp of the Avarice Ogre boss damage phase. So in about 15 seconds or so, 20 seconds of a damage phase, I was able to put out 3.5 million damage. So if you like this video, find it helpful, like the build, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. So let's go ahead and get into this here. I'm going to show you some background gameplay of the setup for the Grasp boss. And I'm going to show you 2 damage attempts. The first one's going to be me testing out kind of the mechanics of how it all works. I'm not really having any surges, anything like that. So it's kind of like a baseline comparison. And the second one I show you changes with all the mods and everything's perfected to the way I like them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it here. As you can see, the first damage phase ended with about a total of 2.2 million, which is pretty standard, pretty common, nothing overly amazing, right? But as we skip ahead to the next damage phase, I'm going to start just before the damage phase starts so you can see what I'm doing here. We're going to be running Song of Flame with Acryus for our damage, so that's going to be our primary standpoint, and I'll talk about why later. But as you can see, I want to make sure that I have full armor charge going into it, and that way I can get my Arc Surge boost. I want to make sure I have my Helion, make sure I'm Prismatic, all those things add up to make a huge difference. So we're applying all of our debuffs, our weakens, everything, and then we're going into our Acryus rotation. Now the reason we're doing this is because Acryus does a ton of damage, especially with the recent boosts, and we're combining that with Song of Flame. Song of Flame makes you just inherently radiant, which is again just extra damage, so you don't have to worry about becoming radiant, and the melee for Song of Flame just pairs perfectly with Acryus. You want to be proccing Trench Barrel all the time, so you want to make sure you're just proccing your Song of Flame every 3 shots. Song of Flame will always cause an ignition when all the melee hits, so you're just doing a ton of extra damage. So as you can see, we did 3.5 million damage there, and that's pretty great in my opinion. It's one of the highest I've seen. I think you technically could get better with an Izzy auto-loading swap of a similar degree with a Nova Bomb, because Nova Bomb got a huge damage boost, so it's actually pretty good now. But other than that, this is very easy to do. I enjoy running it, because Song of Flame just gives you insane survivability. It lasts a long time, so you're just always in super, which is great. You don't have to use the abilities necessarily, you can still just use it for the damage boost from Radiant, and it's just helpful for you and your teammates. But enough about the gameplay, let's go ahead and talk about the mods and the aspects and everything itself. So let's go ahead and get started with the mods and stuff here. On the helmet, the first thing is you want to make sure you have a siphon for whatever weapon you're using. I'm using a solar siphon here. And then a heavy ammo finder is pretty standard. You can swap the finder out for something else if you want to, but I think in general you're going to want both of those things. You could run a harmonic siphon since you are on Song of Flame if you're using a solar weapon, which will free up a little bit of extra energy for you, but otherwise you're good to go. For the arms, I'm running it with double arc loader. I think at minimum you're going to need 1 arc loader for this to be efficient and effective, but you could potentially swap one out, otherwise just be safe and run double arc loader. Chest piece is going to be pretty standard, whatever resists you need. And boots, I'm running triple arc surge. If you need to, you can swap one of these out for some extra survivability, but for the most part, you're going to get max damage by having 3. And then on the bond, we're going to have classic double bomber time dilation. Now, I am running an exotic class item for this. It is Apotheosis Star Eaters. Star Eaters is the important part here, but otherwise, whatever other combination you have with Star Eaters is good to go. For weapons, I'm running Lost Signal with Acryus. Obviously Acryus is going to be the star, but Lost Signal is pretty nice because I have it auto-loading and it just has that constant chill damage. So it's going to apply that darkness debuff, which you'll see from some of the fragments, allows your melee to do even more damage. But Legend of Acryus, again, the star here, just make sure you have that catalyst. So, aspects and fragments. Clearly we're going to be running Song of Flame on Prismatic. Song of Flame is just, as I mentioned, amazing. It makes you radiant for as long as it lasts. It allows you to deal just a ton of scorch and ignition damage. It also just gives you insane damage resistance. I'd say up to like -10, -15, you're practically invincible while you're in your super. Going into your abilities, I like to run this with Arcane Needle and Storm Grenade. This just helps me build up my Prismatic going into this. But for the aspects itself, I run Feed the Void for Devour, which is just even more survivability. And then I actually run Helion for this build just because it gives you even more Scorch stacks and can trigger ignitions. I do like Weaver's Call, but I personally prefer Helion in this instance because it just lasts longer I think it's 15 seconds from when you activate it. So you'll have it up for most of the damage phase, and it's just going to keep pumping out extra damage, as opposed to Weaver's Call. It's going to be like a one and done thing. Alright, for the Fragments, we're going to go Facet of Courage. This is what's going to let us do our solar melee abilities doing extra damage when something is darkness debuffed, and that's going to be from either our Arcane Needle or from our Lost Signal. So we have two ways to darkness debuff. This is just going to make sure your super does extra damage. For Facet of Purpose, this is just going to help us kind of stay alive a little bit more. It's extra restoration on pickup, which is kind of stacked on top of Devour. So when you pick up an Orb of Power, you're going to get just a ton of effects. You're going to get your Armor Charge, you're going to get your Restoration, you're going to get your Arc Surge. So it's just a bunch of things that all kind of tie together. This is just kind of a staple for me in any kind of build that I'm running on Prismatic right now. I might eventually swap this off, but for the time being, I really enjoy Facet of Purpose. Facet of Dominance is going to be our next one. This is just going to make sure that our Void Grenades weaken and our Arc Grenades jolt. Since we are running an Arc Grenade, that jolt is going to be huge, and the Void Grenade from our Prismatic will apply Weaken and Suppression. Next we have Facet of Hope. That's going to be whenever we have an elemental buff, our class ability regens faster. We're pretty much always going to have an elemental buff, so this is just always active. And then last we have Facet of Protection. This is just extra damage resist. You could swap this out for something like Facet of Dawn, but because we're mainly focused on doing damage in super, which we're always going to be Radiant for, I have Facet of Purpose just to keep that extra damage resist and survivability in there. But you could potentially swap out Facet of Hope or Facet of Protection if you, in your particular situation, feel like you don't need it. Now, as I mentioned before with the Void Grenade weakening, that does apply to our Freezing Singularity, so that's why we're activating Prismatic and throwing that grenade before we actually do boss damage. But the Freezing Singularity inherently provides slow and suppression, and then can eventually freeze and shatter and all that fun stuff. But we want to make sure that we actually apply Weaken so that we ourselves can do extra damage in a solo situation, not necessarily like relying on a teammate to provide that Weaken for us. In a team situation, it's a little bit different, but I still like to have that active. And then like I talked about earlier, Song of Flame, you're always going to be Radiant, so that Radiant is just extra damage for free, gives you that anti-barrier function, but the main thing is that melee giving those extra shots off and doing that extra damage. Alright, for the artifact, there's nothing really special in here. The column 3 perks, Galvanic Armor, Void Hemagy, Radiant Orbs, all that stuff, that's just like a staple really for me right now. It's just free things on orb pickup, so like why wouldn't I take that? I'm picking up orbs anyway. There's nothing really in here that you need necessarily. Creeping Chill can be nice. Expanding Abyss isn't really going to help us too much. But Shield Crush could be a good one also. Again, like none of these really do a ton in solo play. You kind of need to mix and match these based on your team composition. So take a look at all these. Whatever you feel like you need is kind of up to you. I personally don't think any of these other than the third column are going to be helping this particular build in the boss situation. But that's going to be it for this video. I hope you found the build helpful. I hope you use it and enjoy it. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything different that you would do to it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.